Starting? Yeah. Okay, so good evening. Welcome back to this class on middle length Lamrim. We had a break for a few weeks. So we'll start with prayers. And while reciting the prayers, you may want to visualize the Buddha in the space in front. Just the Buddha, and you can think the Buddha embodies all other objects of refuge, or you may want to visualize the whole assembly of refuge objects. So it's up to you, but it just makes the prayers more powerful.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one thus gone, the foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, nor the world's supreme guide of beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans, you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate and go for refuge. When I was supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme sign, space like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom, too well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop, a dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing, subdue the four faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niyatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Okay, so take a few minutes to settle your mind. Let aside other thoughts not related to what we're doing here. And then renew or refresh the bodhicitta motivation you generated earlier today, and think that that's your reason for being here, participating in this session. It's to create the causes to become fully enlightened, a Buddha, to be able to benefit all living beings, help them all become free of suffering and its causes, and achieve happiness in its causes, all the way up to the highest happiness of enlightenment. Then let's do a little bit of meditation on one of the topics we learned about in a previous session, previous class. So we have been going through the topic of relying on a spiritual teacher. And one aspect of that is contemplating the kindness of our teacher in order to generate respect, gratitude. So that's part of how we actually rely on a teacher, with our thoughts, with our attitudes. So bring to mind one of your teachers, a teacher from whom you have learned Mahayana Dharma, like the Bodhisattva path, how to develop bodhicitta and practice the 6 perfections and so on. Now, imagine that you meet someone who finds out that you are a student of that teacher, and they ask you, so what has that person done for you? How have they helped you? And you can imagine this person is a Buddhist, has understanding and appreciation of the Buddhist practice, Buddhist path, so you feel like you can talk openly with this person. So imagine that situation, and imagine yourself replying to that question, talking about how that particular teacher has helped you. So, talking about your teacher's qualities and how they've helped you is a bit like a meditation, meditating on those qualities. And so, if you notice feelings of gratitude and respect coming up in your mind as you imagine yourself talking about these things, then you can pause and just focus on those feelings. Let your mind soak in those feelings of gratitude and respect so that they can go deeper and become stronger and more familiar in your mind. Okay, so we haven't had this class for a few weeks, and a lot has been going on here during that time. So you might not remember what we were doing last time. We were going through the topic of relying on a spiritual teacher. And Venerable Children gave a talk last week on this topic, and also some Q&A. So maybe you were able to get some answers to questions that you had about this topic. So we've actually reached the end of this section, and there's just a summary left. So in a way, it's good. The summary will kind of help us remember the main points. So the summary is on page 42 of the book. So I'll read that and then go through the main points again. Okay, so he says, the instructions widely known as Guru Yoga should also be understood according to what has been explained above. It will not be enough to perform the visualization in a single meditation session. When you pursue a Dharma practice from the depths of your heart, you should rely on a spiritual teacher who guides you unmistakably over a long period of time. As Chekawa also said about such an occasion, when you rely on a guru, you may have doubts and abandon him. Since you will only lose without gaining if you do not know how to rely on him, it becomes evident that the cycles of teachings about relying on a spiritual teacher are more important than any others. They are the root of fulfilling your long-held aspirations. So maybe I'll just pause there and go back through some of those points. So in the first sentence, he talks about Guru Yoga. So that term, Guru Yoga, I've always been a little mystified by it. It's not always easy to find an explanation of it. So one context is, for example, the 6-session Guru Yoga that some of you may be practicing. And so I did find a little bit of explanation in this book called Words of My Perfect Teacher by Patrul Rinpoche. This is a text that's kind of like a Lamrim. It's sort of similar to Lamrim, contains some of the same topics. In the translator's introduction to that book, so the book itself is like talking about preliminary practices for Dzogchen, which is, a high tantric practice. And Guru Yoga is one of those preliminary practices. So it says that Guru Yoga is uniting one's mind with the mind of the teacher. It is the very root of the Vajrayana, where the purity of the link between teacher and disciple is of paramount importance. So it seems that the term Guru Yoga is mainly used in Tantra, in Vajrayana. I'm not really sure if it's also exists in Sutra, although it's mentioned here, but this text really is preparing people to later practice Vajrayana. Then he says it's not enough to perform the visualization in a single meditation session. I was a little puzzled by the term visualization too. And in the Lamrim Chenmo, this term is translated as object of meditation, and the Tibetan term is mikpa, which can be translated in different ways. It could mean visualization, it could be object of meditation, but to me, I think object of meditation makes more sense here, because what we're talking about is much more than just visualization. It's contemplating certain points. So he's saying, it's not enough just to meditate on the points included in this topic just once. They need to be done again and again. So I think we know that. We've heard that. We know. Lamrim meditations are to be practiced again and again to make our mind strongly and deeply familiar with them. And that's how we bring about changes in our mind. And in Geshe Zopa's commentary to to this section in the Lamrim Chenmo, the great Lamrim. Venerable Chuni, you can move up here. Geshe Zopa says, if you work on these practices for just a short time, you will not get anywhere. If you want to practice the Dharma from your heart, then you should rely for a long time on a holy spiritual teacher who will lead you unmistakably in the right direction. Yeah, so that's what it says here. You need to rely on a teacher who can guide you unmistakably over a long period of time, not just a few days, a few weeks, but over a long time. And there is the possibility, the danger of developing doubts and giving up a teacher. And so it's important to know the points of this practice of relying on a spiritual teacher and what to do in those kind of situations. If you do develop doubts, it's good to investigate them and talk to your teacher, talk to other teachers, try to resolve your doubts. And it's possible if the teacher does make some serious mistakes or misconduct, then as we've seen before, you might want to distance yourself from your teacher, but not to give up the devotion. In other words, remember the kindness, what you've learned from your teacher, how you've benefited from your teacher. Continue to maintain an attitude of respect for those things and try not to generate anger, hatred, aversion, negative attitudes. It's not easy to do, but that's the best way. And then, he also says the teachings about relying on a spiritual teacher are more important than any others. They are the root of fulfilling our long-held aspirations. So if we don't have a good connection, a good relationship with spiritual teachers, then it becomes difficult to gain correct understanding and practice of the other stages of the path. So this is a really important foundation. And then he says, owing to our coarse afflictions, we do not know how to rely on a spiritual teacher, or we know how, but still do not do it. We have often engaged in many mistaken ways of relying on the Guru while listening to the Dharma. It is difficult for us to develop an awareness of that, even for the purpose of confession and restraint. So he seems to be saying that, we may make faults, we may have faults in our attitudes towards our teacher or in our, in our state of mind as we're listening to Dharma. And sometimes we don't even recognize those faults, because of the presence of so many afflictions in our mind. And he says, however, having understood the benefits and faults as explained above, it is essential to sincerely confess any instances that do not accord with proper reliance and develop many strong resolutions. So I think the more we learn about Dharma and the more we gain understanding of our own mind through recognizing different afflictions and then applying them to our mind so that we can notice what kind of afflictions are going on in our mind. and also learning about different mistakes that we may make with our body, our speech, our mind. As time goes on, as we develop further on the path, we can become more aware of mistakes that we make. And so the ideal thing is to confess these, purify them. If the teacher is still alive, we can communicate our confession to our teacher, apologize to our teacher. And if they're no longer alive, then do confession on our own. We have plenty of opportunities to do that, daily practices of confession. And resolutions, he just mentions making many strong resolutions. Geshe Sopa talks about making a firm resolve to not repeat the error in the future. So making resolutions to do better. Try not to make those mistakes again. And then the last little bit, page 43 says, if you act in that manner, you will become before long like the bodhisattvas, sada prarudita, sada, I don't know how to say it. Anyway, that one. And like the youthful Sudana, who is insatiable in his quest for a spiritual teacher. So apparently Sada Prarudita was a character in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche often talks about this bodhisattva because his name means always crying. So Rinpoche calls him the always crying bodhisattva. And the reason he was always crying was because he really wanted to find the teacher, the guru, with whom he had a karmic connection from past lives. And so he was, going around trying to find that teacher and crying because of having difficulties finding that teacher. He eventually did find his teacher, but this was such a strong feeling for him that he cried a lot. And then Sudana is in this Avatamsaka Sutra. Is that the Flower Garland Sutra? No, or Array of Star. Yeah. And so that's the one I mentioned earlier. He also was searching for a teacher, and he met many, many, many different teachers, including many female teachers. And then the final teacher he met was Samantabhadra, who in his teaching spoke this prayer, the King of Prayers. So those are two famous disciples who went on searches for their teachers. And in Geshe Sopa's commentary to the Lamrim Chenmo, which, many of the points are the same, so you can find a lot of information in that book. It isn't always in this book. So in Geshe Sopa's commentary, as a conclusion, he says, once you lose this life, it is uncertain both where you will be reborn and what kind of relationship you will have with a qualified spiritual teacher. Therefore, dedicate your positive potential so that in the future, right up to the point you attain enlightenment, you may never be separated from a perfect teacher and the teachings. You should make this kind of dedication prayer again and again. If you do that from the heart, then before long you will become like these two bodhisattvas, Sada Prarudita and Sudana, who set the historical standard for how to rely on a spiritual teacher. Okay, are there any questions on this topic before we move on to the next one? Venerable Kunga.
The term uniting one's mind with the mind of the teacher, is that literal or metaphorical?
Yeah, again, I think this is in Tantra. And my understanding, it does sound quite kind of mystical. I don't think it means literally, because that's actually not possible. Yeah, it's not possible for two minds to merge and become one, but rather it's, I mean, the way I understand it, which is may not be correct, but it's when we do certain practices, for example, even Shakyamuni Buddha practice or Chenrezig practice, we visualize the deity outside of ourselves, and then at the end they dissolve into us, and we meditate on our minds becoming of one taste. I mean, they do sometimes say becoming one, and I've asked about that because it does sound like something impossible, or how can it be possible? And so what I've heard is, yeah, it's not literally one, but more, I want to attain the same realizations, qualities as my guru. I want my mind to become just like my guru's mind. So that's how I understand it. Yeah. The guru is like an example, a role model that we aspire to become like, but that doesn't mean, we become them or they become us, but rather become like them. Anyone else?
So you were saying that this guru yoga practice is more predominantly talked about in Tantra contexts.
Yeah.
I'm wondering is there a sutra level type of guru yoga practice for like Buddhist masters of the past, not necessarily our current spiritual mentor?
I really don't know. Like I say, I've been kind of puzzled by that term guru yoga, because it's used a lot, but it's not always easy to find an actual explanation of what it means. But when I have seen it used, it does seem to be in the context of Tantra. So whether there's a sutra level guru yoga practice, I don't know. I'm not sure. It's possible though, because in the Lamrim Chenmo, when this term is used, guru yoga, there is a footnote, and the footnote says, Khenser Yeshe Thupten, who I guess was one of the masters they were consulting when translating the text, he defines the practice of guru yoga as keeping the mind in single-pointed meditation on the method of reliance on the teacher and employing that method in practice. So that sounds like what could be a sutra level practice of guru yoga. So maybe that term does have a sutra aspect, but again, not always easy to find a explanation of it. And as we've seen, so much of the materials, like even the Lamrim, has a kind of elements of Tantra mixed into it. So maybe sometimes difficult to extract what's purely sutra and what's, an influence from Tantra. But anyway, I think we could say in general that, yeah, relying on a spiritual teacher, all these different points we've been going through, taking time to get to know a teacher, ensuring they have the right qualities, and then the practices of relying by thought, relying by action, and so on. So all those practices probably constitute guru yoga. Yeah. Okay, so then the next chapter, chapter 5, is entitled A Meditation Session. And so in this section, Lama Tsongkhapa explains how to do a session of meditation on the Lamrim, starting with the 6 preparatory practices. So this is going back to the outline just to see where we're at. So the first three main topics that we went through were the greatness of the author, Atisha, but also Lama Tsongkhapa, and then the greatness of the teaching, the Lamrim itself, and then how to listen to and explain the teaching, the Lamrim. And then the fourth main topic is how the stages by which a student should be guided through the actual instructions. So the bulk of the book is included in that. And then under that, the first point was relying on a spiritual teacher, the root of the path, and that's chapters 4 and 5. And then under that A, the somewhat elaborate explanation for generating certainty. So that's what we've just gone through, all those detailed explanations of relying on a spiritual teacher. And then the second point is condensed presentation of how to practice. So this is where we're at now. So it's still connected with relying on a spiritual teacher, but in a condensed way. And so the next slide shows the outlines. So the condensed presentation of how to practice, that has two main points: the actual way to practice, and then number 2, the need to employ 2 kinds of practice. And then under actual way to practice, that has 2 points: what to do during the meditation session and what to do in the periods in between sessions of meditation. So what to do during the meditation session has 3 points. First, what to do during preparation. That's what we'll look at next. What to do during the actual session and what to do at the end. Okay, so what to do during preparation. This is the 6 Preparatory Practices. And Venerable Tarpa recently gave some BBCs on these, but it doesn't hurt to go through them again. So the next slide has them. Okay. Okay, so page 45 in the book, meditation session. The condensed presentation of how to practice. This has 2 points: the actual way to practice and the need to employ 2 kinds of practice. The actual way to practice has 2 points: what to do during the meditation itself and what to do in between sessions. What to do during the meditation session has 3 points: what to do in preparation, during the actual session, and what to do at the end. So what to do in preparation. He says, engage in the 6 preparatory practices presented in the biography of Ser Lingpa. Who is Ser Lingpa? One of many teachers. Atisha had, 150 something teachers, but this was the one that, he mainly enabled him to develop bodhicitta. So he regarded this teacher as particularly precious. Okay, so first, clean your dwelling and arrange representations of the exalted body, speech, and mind. So he doesn't go into details with that. We have to get the details elsewhere, but I think, Pabonka Rinpoche's Liberation in the Palm of the Hand has quite a lot of nice details, like the benefits of sweeping, cleaning, and so on and so forth. So I think everyone here is quite familiar with the importance of cleaning the place where you're going to meditate, and then setting up an altar with representations of the body, speech, and mind. Usually we have a statue of the Buddha representing the body, and then a text representing the speech, and then a stupa representing the mind. Second, beautifully arranged offerings, honestly acquired. So putting offerings, and they need to be acquired in a honest way, not through any of the 5 wrong livelihoods, like hinting and so on. So using deceptive means to acquire offerings or money to buy offerings. So we need to make sure the offerings we receive are required in a correct, honest, ethical way. And third, on a comfortable seat, straighten your body and assume a suitable lotus or half lotus posture, making sure that your mind is suffused with refuge and bodhicitta. So there's a lot there, how to sit properly. And then generate right motivation, ideally the motivation of bodhicitta, aspiring to become fully enlightened, to benefit all living beings, followed by then taking refuge in bodhicitta. And then fourth, in the space in front of you, imagine the lineage gurus of vast conduct and profound view, as well as countless Buddhas, Arya Bodhisattvas, Shravakas, and Pratyeka Buddhas, along with those who dwell in the Buddha's words. Thus visualize the merit field. So I think Venerable Chuni has been explaining that quite extensively recently. The visualization of the objects in relation to whom we're doing our practice. Then fifth, it is exceedingly difficult for paths to arise in your mind stream if the favorable conditions for their arising, the accumulations of merit and wisdom, have not been collected in their adverse conditions. The obstructions have not been purified. Therefore, to unite the key points of accumulation and purification, purify your mind stream by means of the 7-limb practice. So he went through the first 4 points very quickly with one sentence each. And then now with the 5th point, which is the 7 limbs, he's going into these in more detail. Okay, so as for the limb of prostration, the prostration combining the 3 doors is set out in the stanza. So the verses here are from the King of Prayers, although it's a somewhat different translation than the one we are familiar with. But apparently the translation here is from Geshe Zopa's commentary. So I'm not sure, I didn't look who translated those, but okay, so the verse for prostration says, I bow respectfully with body, speech, and mind to all the lions among men without exception, in however many worlds there are, in the 10 directions and 3 times. I think our translation has lions among humans or something. Okay, so then Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary is, this is not prostration to the Buddhas in just the world spheres in one direction and of one time. Rather, focusing on all the victors residing in all 10 directions, past, present, and future, you reverently prostrate body, speech, and mind to them from the depths of your heart. Can anyone visualize that? All the Buddhas in all 10 directions, and from the past, and in the present, and in the future. I mean, I just try to, imagine all those Buddhas, and then prostrate. And then he goes on to say, there are prostrations for each of the 3 doors individually. Physical prostration is set out in the stanza. Owing to the power of prayer for good conduct of all the Buddhas directly appearing to my mind, I bow sincerely to all these Buddhas with as many bodies as there are atoms in the world, He says, you take all the victors in all the directions and times as the objects of your mental focus, as though perceiving them directly, emanating your own body and manifestations as numerous as fine particles, you prostrate to them. So you imagine your body multiplying so that there's as many duplicates, replicas of your body as there are atoms. And then all those bodies are prostrating to all the Buddhas. It's pretty mind-boggling. But yeah, I'm sure a great practitioner like Lama Tsongkhapa would be able to do that. And so much more merit is created because you're not bowing with just one body, you're bowing with innumerable bodies. You're not bowing to just one Buddha, but you're bowing to innumerable Buddhas. So the merit will be multiplied vastly. And having generated the power of faith in the excellent conduct of these holy objects, be motivated by that. So not just having that kind of visualization, but having the state of mind that is aware of the excellent qualities of all those Buddhas and what they have done, their accomplishments, their deeds, having genuine faith in all of those, then that's the ideal state of mind to have when doing this. So that's physical prostration, prostrating with the body. Mental prostration is set forth in the stanza. On every atom, as many Buddhas as there are atoms are surrounded by bodhisattvas. Every one is absorbed in meditation on suchness. I fully venerate all of these accomplished ones. I was interested in that translation. It's, again, different from ours, but I like it. Every single one of those Buddhas is surrounded by bodhisattvas, and every one of them is absorbed in meditation on suchness. And again, this is from Geshe Zopa's commentary. Okay, so the visualization increases. It says, on top of every minute particle, Buddhas as innumerable as dust particles reside, encircled by bodhisattvas. So we're not just thinking of all the Buddhas in all 10 directions, but we're imagining Buddhas on every single particle, every single atom. And in each of these particles, there's innumerable Buddhas, and they're surrounded by bodhisattvas. So that's really getting pretty amazing. And again, generate faith, recollecting their excellent qualities. So this is mental prostration, making prostration with the mind. Then verbal prostration, prostration with speech, is set forth in the stanza that says, I extol the good qualities of all the Buddhas. I praise all of the Sugatas with the sounds of an ocean of songs in voices of inexhaustible seas of praise. Okay, so here's another visualization. From each of the bodies, I think it must mean your bodies, because earlier we imagined our body multiplied to fill all the atoms of space. And so I think it's those bodies that we now visualize innumerable heads. Okay, so from each of our bodies emanate innumerable heads, and from each of the heads, again, innumerable tongues singing inexhaustible praises of the object's excellent qualities to sweet melodies. Okay, so all these duplicates of our own body have many, many heads emanating from them. And then each of these heads has many, many, many tongues. And each of those tongues are singing these praises of the excellent qualities of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and sweet melodies. So they're actually singing these praises. Here, songs are praises, and their voices, that is, their causes, are the tongues. The word ocean conveys a great quantity. So again, if you could do that visualization, I find it difficult, but if you could, it would be quite amazing and very much merit, great merit created. Okay, so that's for the limb of prostration. So I think, just do what you can. If you can't, if you can't manage such a huge, vast, complex visualization, then just do the best you can, and be content with that. And as time goes on and your powers of visualization and concentration increase, then you could increase the number of objects to which you're prostrating to, as well as emanations of yourself making prostrations. Okay, then the second limb is offering. And it talks about surpassable and unsurpassable offerings. So first is surpassable offerings. These are set forth in the 2 stanzas that say, I offer these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas fabulous flowers, glorious garlands, symbols, scented balm, precious parasols, excellent butter lamps, and superb incense. I offer these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas sublime garments, supreme scents, sachets of fragrant powder equal to Mount Meru, and every wonderful thing in a splendid array. So these are probably, in ancient India, traditional offerings, things that would be considered, beautiful and wonderful and worthy of offering to holy beings like the Buddhas. So I think we could also, add things in our present contemporary culture that things that we find really beautiful and wonderful, and imagine those being offered to all the Buddhas. So fabulous flowers are marvelous specimens of divine and human flowers. Glorious garlands are many different kinds of flowers strung together. Both together encompass actual and imaginary flowers. Symbols are the sounds of traditional instruments and the like. Scented balm is a mixture of fragrant perfumes. Precious parasols are the finest of parasols. Butter lamps are fragrant, radiant lights from things like incense or butter, as well as glowing jewel lights. Nowadays we have amazing lights that we can think of and imagine offering. Incense refers to combinations of fragrant substances and to single ones. Sublime garments are the finest of cloths. A supreme scent is water and the like, pervaded by a scent that fills the billion world systems with fragrance and is non-toxic. Well, a lot of perfumes and incense are toxic, so I want to make sure that nothing toxic in there. The sachets of powder are packaged powders of fragrant incense suitable for scattering and burning, or the colored sand powder of a mandala, in multiple layers as wide and as high as Mount Meru. Array joined at the end to all the above means a great quantity, artfully and colorfully arranged. So we can use our imaginations and just really create this vision, this visualization of vast, beautiful, wonderful offerings. And then it mentions unsurpassable offerings. So surpassable offerings, those are the previous ones. Those are offerings made by ordinary beings, worldly beings. And unsurpassable offerings are things emanated by powerful beings like bodhisattvas. That verse says, may all these unsurpassable and vast offerings appear before all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Through the power of faith, along with virtuous deeds, I pay homage and make offerings to all the conquerors. So here he says, since surpassable offerings are those of worldly beings, this here is everything good emanated by powerful beings such as bodhisattvas. So a bodhisattva would have the ability to mentally create really huge, vast amount of beautiful, precious offerings, and maybe even make them real. High level bodhisattvas, Arya bodhisattvas, can create manifestations, so they could probably actually create these kind of offerings and then offer them to the Buddhas and bodhisattvas. The last two lines are to be joined to all the previous couplets in order to complete them. I guess that means, through the power of faith, along with virtuous deeds, I pay homage and make offerings to all the conquerors. They indicate the motivation for the prostrations and offerings as well as their object. Then the third of the 7 limbs is confession. The confession of bad deeds is set forth in this stanza. I confess each and every one of the negative actions I have done with my body, speech, and mind, influenced by desire, hatred, and ignorance. Depending on the cause, the 3 poisons, and by means of the 3 bases, body, speech, and mind, their nature is that I have done them, that is, that I have actually created them, done them myself. I have made others create them, so we sometimes incite others or tell others, order others to create negative actions. And I have rejoiced in those created by others. So even if we didn't incite someone to do something negative, they just do it on their own. But if we rejoice, we feel happy, glad about that, then these are all ways in which we create negative karma. So all of those are generally subsumed under I have done. So all the negative actions I have done in those ways. If through regret, recollecting their faults, you regret those done previously and sincerely confess them with the intention to abstain from them in the future, you stop the increase of deeds done in the past and stop committing them in the future. So while reciting that verse, then it's important to have a sincere feeling of regret, recognizing the faults of those actions. They lead to nothing but suffering, all the different kinds of suffering consequences that come from negative karma, including the tendency to do them again, which is said to be the worst of the results, karmic results, because then we keep creating that same karma again and again and keep perpetuating our suffering again and again. So it's important to really be clear about the negative results, negative consequences of non-virtuous actions, and regret those that we did before and have the strong determination to refrain from doing them in the future. And then next is rejoicing. This is in the stanza. I rejoice in all the merit, whatever it may be, of all the Buddhas of the 10 directions, bodhisattvas, pratyeka Buddhas, those with more to learn, those with no more to learn, and all ordinary beings. So it doesn't specifically mention hearers, but it seems that sometimes when pratyeka Buddhas are mentioned, it includes hearers as well. So we have to think of them. Because he says, as you recall the benefits of the virtue of the 5 types of persons, you cultivate joy. So the 5 types of persons are the Buddhas, bodhisattvas, pratyeka Buddhas, hearers, and ordinary beings. And with Pratyeka Buddhas and hearers, those are both divided into those with more to learn and those with no more to learn. So those with no more to learn are those who've already attained the state of arhat, nirvana. And those with more to learn are not yet at that point. They're on their way, but not yet, not having reached the fifth path, the path of no more learning. So we think of all the virtue, all the good karma, all the good deeds of all these types of persons, including oneself. We're not mentioned directly here, but we do need to think of ourselves and rejoice in our own merit. We are one of the ordinary beings, so we're included in them, the ordinary beings. So yeah, to think of all the beings and all the different levels and all the virtuous actions, the good actions they've done and are doing and will do in the future, and then feel joy, feel glad of all that virtue. So this is a way of increasing virtue, creating virtue. We create virtue by rejoicing in the virtue of others. So it's kind of an easy way to create virtue. Even if there's certain things we're not able to do ourselves, meditating on emptiness with, direct realization. I can't do that anyway. But if I rejoice in those who have that ability, who are doing that, then I'm creating some virtue as well and creating the cause to attain that myself in the future, to become able to do that in the future. That's a really beautiful, wonderful practice. Okay, what are we up to now? I've lost count. I think this is number 6, 7, no, 5. Okay. Yeah, I don't have the 7 limbs up there. Okay, the next one is requesting to turn the wheel of Dharma. This is in the stanza. I implore all the protectors, lights of the world in the 10 directions who have reached Buddhahood, which is without attachment, to turn the peerless wheel of the teaching. So there's a visualization here. Emanating the same number of bodies, you exhort those who have awoken to complete Buddhahood in the fields of the 10 directions, those who have found unobstructed, exalted knowledge, free of attachment, to teach the Dharma as soon as possible. Yeah. So in some texts, this practice has you visualize offering a wheel, like the golden wheel of Dharma. So he doesn't mention that here, but just emanate yourself in many different bodies, filling all atoms of space, and with all those bodies expressing the request to those who have attained Buddhahood to teach the wheel of Dharma. And then supplication, this must be number 6, is set forth in the stanza. I supplicate with palms joined in prayer those wishing to demonstrate their final nirvana. Please stay as many eons as there are atoms to benefit and bring happiness to all beings. Supplicate those throughout the 10 directions who show how to pass beyond sorrow, to remain, not passing into nirvana for as many eons as the number of fine dust particles there are in the universe, in order to bring about the benefit and happiness of sentient beings. So it said that we don't really have to ask the Buddhas to not pass into nirvana because they've made that vow. That's their commitment to remain in the world and helping sentient beings as long as there are sentient beings. Okay, so there's really no need to worry that they're going to disappear. But it's more for our own benefit that we do this practice of requesting them to just express our appreciation of their existence, their presence, and it's also a way of purifying any mistakes we may have made in relation to our spiritual teachers or to the Buddhas. So it's something beneficial for ourselves to do this. And then finally, dedication. This is set forth in the stanza. Whatever little merit I have accumulated by prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and supplicating, I dedicate it all to enlightenment. All the roots of virtue represented by the previous 6 limbs are made the common property of all sentient beings and never come to an end, since they have been dedicated with strong aspiration as causes of complete enlightenment. So we dedicate all the merit that we create to enlightenment, then he's saying it becomes the common property of all sentient beings, because the whole purpose of becoming enlightened is to be able to work for the benefit of all sentient beings, as long as there are sentient beings. So it's like we're sharing that merit with all living beings, and will never come to an end. So they say it's like if you have a cup of water and you pour it into a huge body of water like the ocean, and as long as that ocean is there, the cup of water will still be there. It won't evaporate. It won't disappear. So I really like that idea. When we dedicate our merits for enlightenment, it's like pouring our merits into the ocean, the vast ocean of merits that have been accumulated by all of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and that will never dry up as long as there are still sentient beings in samsara who need to be helped. So we're adding our merit to their merit, and in that way it becomes kind of inexhaustible, never disappear, never dry up. And then he says, if you thus develop an understanding of the meaning of those words and slowly do as was taught without allowing your mind to wander, you will gather immeasurable heaps of merit. So even if we're doing a shorter version of the 7 limb, like this one kind of like one stanza version of the 7 limb prayer that we often do, it's still nice to do it slowly, and you can pause after each line and contemplate the meaning and do as much of these visualizations as you can, given your time and your ability. That way it becomes much more meritorious, much more powerful, meaningful. And then he says 5 of these limbs, prostrating, offering, requesting, supplicating, and rejoicing, belong to the collection of accumulations. So that's one side of the 2 accumulations that we need to collect, to accumulate for the attainment of enlightenment, collection of merit. No, I'm not. This isn't merit and wisdom. This is talking about accumulating merit and purification of negativities. So 5 of the limbs are on the side of accumulating merit, positive energy, and then confessing, that purifies obstructions. So that clears away karmic imprints, things that would hinder our practice, our development. And then rejoicing, one aspect of rejoicing, the cultivation of joy in one's own virtue, multiplies the virtue. So when we rejoice in our own virtue, then it multiplies. But yeah, he also mentions rejoicing among the limbs that belong to the collection of accumulation. So rejoicing in the merit of others will accumulate merit, virtue. And then dedicating the seventh of the seven limbs by means of dedicating the virtues of collecting, purifying, and multiplying, however small, are multiplied manifoldly. And what would normally come to an end after producing a temporary effect is made inexhaustible. So when we dedicate the merit, then all of that merit is multiplied and becomes inexhaustible. So he says, in brief, there are the three: accumulating, purifying, and multiplying and making inexhaustible. So the seven limbs can be divided among those three different types. Some accumulate merit, others purify, and then others multiply and make inexhaustible the merit. And then sixth, so sixth is the sixth of the six preparatory practices. As for the final preparatory practice, with a clear visualization of the objects, offer a mandala, and with strong aspiration, make numerous requests. Please grant blessings that all erroneous attitudes, such as disrespecting the spiritual teacher, may cease, and that all the non-erroneous attitudes towards the spiritual teacher may come about with ease. I request blessings that all outer and inner obstacles may be pacified. So in some lists of the six preparatory practices, the mandala is included in number 5. Yeah, but here he has it in number 6. I don't know, to me it kind of makes sense to have it in number 6 because we're making this mandala offering containing everything in the universe, all the beautiful and precious things in the universe, and then making this request, requesting the blessings of all the objects in the merit field to give blessings that, basically what we're asking for is that whatever attitudes there are in my mind that are contrary to the Lamrim meditations, or whatever specific Lamrim topic you're going to be meditating on, like relying on a spiritual teacher. So any attitudes in my mind that are contrary to and would obstruct my ability to, gain those realizations that I'm going to be meditating on, may those be cleared away, and may I receive the blessings to quickly gain these realizations. So if you're doing another Lamrim topic, then you could, ask for blessings to specifically clear away obstacles, whatever erroneous attitudes or obstructing attitudes you may have that would make it hard for you to meditate on and gain that realization. So those be cleared away, and then asking for blessings that my mind will quickly gain the correct understanding and realizations of those. Does that make sense? Any questions? Kind of going through these rather quickly. You could spend days or weeks going into all the details of these 6 preparatory practices. Gyatso.
Is it your understanding that when you dedicate, then every single sentient being you dedicate for receives the same exact amount of merit that you just created?
I don't know. Where did you get that idea?
I know I've heard that from a teaching before,
Huh?
but I heard that from a teaching before, but I wasn't sure. I wanted to check it to make sure.
I don't know if it's really, I don't think you can transfer your merit to somebody else. Yeah, That sounds strange, because they would say, well, if that was possible, the Buddha has created this huge, vast amount of merit, and if he could give us his merit, each sentient being could get a merit from the Buddha, then we'd have a huge amount of merit. But I don't really think that's possible. But what we're dedicating to is enlightenment. My goal is becoming enlightened, becoming a Buddha as quickly as possible. And once I'm a Buddha, I'm going to work for all sentient beings. But even before becoming a Buddha, as you're progressing on the path, the Bodhisattva path, you're working to help sentient beings, your ability to help sentient beings increases. But to actually transfer your merit to other sentient beings, I don't think that's possible. Yeah? Anyone else hear anything different?
Quite sure, but is it like you can dedicate some of your merits to those that are related by blood or have karmic connections, or there's certain criteria whereby they can receive it? Is it true?
Well, I've heard that about, for example, if somebody has passed away and you want to benefit that person, it's said that those who are related, have blood relations, are in a better position to be able to help that person. So if they create merit and do prayers and so on and dedicate that to the person who's passed away, there's a greater chance that it would benefit them. But I'm not really sure if it's a question of actually transferring your merit to that person. I don't think that's possible, but perhaps, my guess, this is just a guess, that you're creating all this merit, thinking of that person, dedicating it for that person. That's like a lot of positive energy going to that person. And that may be like water nourishing. If they do have some karmic seeds there in their mind, good karmic seeds, then this is like water that will nourish them and make them sprout, so that then there's a greater chance that good things will come about, a good rebirth for that person. That's my guess. I'm not really sure if that's how it works or not, but yeah.
It's tricky when it says all the roots of virtue are made the common property of all sentient beings. It makes it sound like they own it, like now it's theirs, it's their property. So it kind of tricks my mind that way.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, it is an interesting. I'll have a look later to see if Geshe-Zopa says anything about that. But when I read that, I didn't think that means, I'm actually transferring, like legally, we transfer property to somebody else, but rather that we're sharing. I think of it as I'm sharing my merit with all sentient beings for the purpose of our attainment of enlightenment, because I want to become enlightened and then bring all other sentient beings to enlightenment as well. That's the way I understood that when I read that. Instead of keeping my merits just for me, my benefit, my happiness, my good rebirth, my enlightenment, but I'm, sharing it with all living beings. So it's more my attitude about my merit, rather than I can actually give them my merit. Because as far as I know, that's not possible to do. Melissa.
I watched a film, Mystical Tibet, where Lama Tsongkhapa went to Tibet with a bunch of people, and he's making, a lot of times when he's making offerings to statues and stuff, he's like, I make this on behalf, and he lists all these people, like, I make this on behalf of Bin Laden. That might be the only virtue he gets in this lifetime. And my impression from that was that just changes how we think of those people and brings them into the purview of our compassion to help our bodhicitta. And then through us developing bodhicitta, we will progress and they will benefit from that.
Mm.
But I was really touched by that, actually, because he's listing people that at that time, you know, people were not thinking so kindly about him.
He was enemy number one.
But he's just like, he's doing this with his virtue. He's like
Yeah.
his merit he's making. He's like, who can I give it to? It was really beautiful.
I mean, maybe another way of thinking of that is because he's a bodhisattva, and he's thinking of Osama bin Laden and others who do dastardly deeds, and making this merit, you know, creating this virtue, having all these positive thoughts and positive actions, thinking of them, maybe even imagining them there. So maybe by that, you know, some connection is made that he will be able to benefit them as sooner than later. I don't know. I mean, this is talking about something that's beyond my ability to understand, but it's certainly a beautiful thing to do. And when we do our practices, our meditations and so on, we're encouraged to imagine all the sentient beings sitting around us. And I like to think of them doing this practice with me. And in that way, they're getting some benefit, some creating merit with me. Whether or not that's really happening, I don't know. But if you were a highly accomplished person, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche or His Holiness or Lama Tsongkhapa, the power of your mind, the power of your meditation, visualization, the purity of your attitudes and so on, maybe they can actually benefit those people. It's hard to know.
When we're making the requests, I struggle with this. We're not asking the Buddhas to do these things for us, right? Or can you talk more on blessings, and are we also making requests to ourselves for that inspiration?
Which request?
Like the supplication, or yeah, making at the end it says, please grant blessings so that all erroneous attitudes can be dispelled.
Yeah, I mean, again, the Buddha can't go into our mind and kind of rearrange things and throw out the, unhelpful attitudes and kind of plant good attitudes. I don't think that's possible. But to make that request, to as sincerely as possible, like I really do want my mind to change. I want to stop having these negative thoughts, these unhelpful thoughts, and I want to have more positive, helpful thoughts so that I can progress along the path. So really feeling that sincerely while visualizing these objects of refuge, the merit field in front of us, praying for them. I think it's through that something will happen. I mean, usually the visualization involves light coming from them and filling us and, flushing out all that negativity. But again, I don't know if that can really happen. I don't think so. But it's more, a combination of our sincerity and pure motivation. And of course, the more we can have concentration, the better concentration, focus on what we're doing, then that's, I think, what brings about the change. Some may disagree. There may be some who say, no, we really can receive blessings from the Buddha and that will change our mind. I don't know. I can't say one way or the other, but that's what makes sense to me, is that it's our own practice, the combination of our thoughts, our feelings, our ability to concentrate, our understanding of what we're doing and so on. That's what will actually bring about changes. Because again, otherwise, if the Buddha did have that ability to come into our minds and make changes, why didn't he do that a long time ago? But of course, there is, like at the time of the Buddha, when the Buddha was in the world and teaching, and here was this being who had totally purified his own mind, gained all realizations and qualities, and he was walking around in the world, making himself available for people. And there were some who met him and were like, wow, and asked for teachings and listened to teachings and had incredible changes happening in their mind. But others were like, who's this guy? And even, having negative, seeing faults and things to criticize in the Buddha. So, something needs to come from both sides. I mean, there are the existence of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. They're there, ready, waiting for us to turn our minds to them and open our hearts to them and request help from them. So they're ready to help us. But much of it has to do with our minds being open, being receptive, having the right qualities, faith, the aspiration to change, and so on. So if those two things come together, then there's a greater chance of our mind changing. But it's not something that can come exclusively from the Buddhas.
When we make a mandala offering, is it all right to include things that we don't like? Because in our prayer book, it says, or maybe it doesn't say that, but it does.
The inner mandala offering your friend, enemy, stranger.
But like things that are causing you trouble and suffering, entrust that to the Buddha for his safekeeping. That's something we say. Is that traditional?
Well, there's different kinds of mandala offerings. So one is called the outer mandala offering, and that's where we offer the universe. I mean, it's usually, explained as Mount Meru, four continents. That's the, according to Indian cosmology. But I remember long ago, Lama Yeshe told one student she was going to do the ngundro, the preliminary practice of mandala offerings, and he said, offer supermarkets, all this stuff in the supermarkets and so on. So that's kind of nice to know that you can include the things that you know and you relate to. And then Rob Priest wrote that very beautiful version of the mandala offering, which is much more contemporary and personal, the things that we know and we value. So you can do both or either of those. So that's the outer mandala. And then the inner mandala, that's where how does it go? Offer my body, wealth, friend, enemy, stranger. So the way I think of that is the things that I'm hung up on, the things that my mind is kind of stuck to, and with attachment, with aversion. Now it says the objects of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. So the things, my mind is stuck to. So by offering those, then we're overcoming those attitudes, and objects of aversion. I remember one time I was somebody raised their hand and said, but how can I offer my enemy to the Buddha? That's not a nice offering. And I said, but do you think the Buddha sees that person the same way you do? And she went, oh. Right. So it's like our problem that we have aversion for this person, but the Buddha doesn't have any aversion for the Buddha. That person is beautiful and wonderful, and they have just love and compassion. And the same with, it doesn't mention things like garbage here, but even there, the things that we have aversion or disgust for, from the point of view of Buddha, there's nothing ugly or disgusting, nothing that's displeasing to them, because they have pure view. So it's kind of like recognizing how our mind, because of our afflictions, causes us to see things in distorted ways, and that's what we really need to overcome. So that's one way you can think about this offering, offering all of these things. And okay, to the Buddha, they're all beautiful. They're all perfect. Nothing. And yeah, the real purpose is to overcome those afflictions in our mind. And then the last line, may I and all others be free of those three poisonous attitudes. That's really beautiful. Requesting that every being could not be bothered by those attitudes anymore. Does that make sense? So there's actually a lot of things you can meditate on there. Okay, so let's stop there. Dedicate our merit, make it the common property of all sentient beings for their attainment of enlightenment.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of wholesome teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the three worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niyatayami. Due to this merit may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born and no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezig, may you stay until samsara ends. May the deeds of explaining and practicing the Dharma done by groups supporting the teachings and their upholders, who spread the view of dependent arising and non-violent actions in the 10 directions, and especially at Sravasti Abbey in the West. Flourish.